Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. Her phone hit the table and skidded toward me, no warning. I'm Daniel, 39, and I hadn't called her daughter. Invite her now, my wife's jaw locked as if bracing. I lifted the phone and felt my own pulse climb. I knew this would draw blood before noon. I tapped the contact and put it on speaker. 4 rings dragged, then the voicemail tone snapped. I ended the call and stared at my thumb. My wife's eyes didn't blink, not once. She reached and turned the speaker back on. The screen flashed a new banner and vanished fast. Blocked contact, attempted call, tiny text like a dare. Her mouth opened a fraction and then closed. You didn't block her, she stood very still. I wish that were the whole problem. I opened settings and scrolled the cool list. Nothing sat there, no block, no trick entry. She blocked me, the words came out flat. The kitchen went smaller by an inch. Silence filled everything that should have helped. She asked for this, I slid the message up. Please do not call me directly, go through mom. I had archived it 2 weeks ago and obeyed. My wife pinched the bridge of her nose hard. That boundary sounded clean until today. Calendar alerts stacked like falling tiles, one after another. Head count confirmed at 10 by noon, no changes after. I had answered early and locked the seats. I put the email by her hands like proof. Proof can still explode when you read it. You chose without me, she breathed through clenched teeth. You were in surgery, I kept my voice level. Her hospital badge lay between us like a dare. I kept the old number because chaos wrecked last year. Last year wasn't a shield right now. The text I hid burned through my pocket. If you force it, I'll blow up dinner. I opened it and let the words stand tall. Her throat worked once and then went quiet. My choice looked smaller than my secret. You should have told me, her hand found the chair. I thought I was protecting you, the excuse tasted metallic. Shielding someone by silence invites a worse storm. I had measured risk and skipped the hardest step. I felt the bill arrive with interest. I drafted a message and kept it blunt. I am sorry I hid this and I will own it. I will route invites through you and follow the boundary. I hovered over send and listened to the room breathe. I pressed the screen because hesitation fixes nothing. She opened a fresh invite and typed her daughter's name. Her fingers paused and she looked at me once. I will send this and we keep it controlled. No surprises, no traps, no last-minute heroics. I nodded while expecting the next tremor. A reply landed before the draft cleared the screen, 2 lines only. Remove him from planning, I'll consider showing up. My wife stiffened and tapped the counter once. I felt heat rise and chose not to answer. Silence stretched like a rope pulled tight. Do we accept terms, she asked without blinking. Not like that, I kept my palms open. She wants control through me, her throat moved hard. I won't fight you in front of her. We both knew a fight had already started. Another ping hit and stacked under the first. Also no photos of me, no group chat. My wife rubbed her temple and looked past me. She is worried about ambushes. I thought about last year and bit down. I can step out during prep, I meant it. You won't step out of your own home, her jaw set. This is not about rooms. It is about trust that keeps shrinking. We stood there while the phone waited. I typed a careful line and showed it. We will keep logistics simple and predictable. No games, no pressure. Food at 3, exit option anytime. I hovered until she nodded once. We sent it and watched the typing bubbles move. They appeared and vanished like a dare. Minutes slid with no answer and too much thinking. I started stacking tasks on paper just to breathe. The bubbles rose again and finally held. Fine, I will come if he does not speak to me. My wife exhaled but did not relax. I watched the words and tasted metal again. I can do that for one afternoon. I knew keeping quiet would not stay quiet. Set a check-in call before the day, she whispered. With her only, her fingers were tight. She refuses my number, I reminded. Then I call and you listen on speaker. She placed the phone between us like a test. I nodded and reached for coffee that had cooled. I put it back and decided to stay clear. I would not argue timing or tone or lines. I would carry trays and keep my mouth closed. I also knew I would not let lies breathe. Her screen lit again with a final condition. No gifts unless I accept them in advance. We stared at the sentence and measured it. This is about controlling surprises, she murmured. I saw another blow forming on the horizon. She typed back with steady hands and trimmed phrases. Understood, send what feels acceptable by tomorrow. I watched her spell tomorrow with deliberate care. Then she looked at me and did not blink. We do this together or not at all. The speakerphone chirped once and my stomach tightened hard. My wife angled the mic toward her and cleared her throat. Calling now, she pressed the contact and watched the timer climb. I placed both hands on the counter to keep still. The line opened with a sharp inhale on the other end. I have time for 5 minutes, a door clicked in the background. We need to confirm details for the day, her voice stayed even. No changes to my terms, nails tapped against something hard. We agreed to timing and exit freedom, she kept it clipped. I heard that, I want one more condition. My neck prickled because this was outside the text chain. No conversations near me, not even small talk. Silence from our end stretched while we processed the ask. I can arrange spaces so paths do not cross. You will keep him silent, this is not negotiable. I watched my wife's jaw flex once before she answered. He will respect your boundary for the afternoon. I wanted in writing, the demand landed like a stamp. We will send a short note after this call. I also want arrival staggered so I am not ambushed. That word hit harder than I expected and shifted my focus. What time feels safe for your entrance? My wife kept steady. 15 minutes after everyone else sits. We can seat early and walk you in. I will stand by the door until I am ready. Her certainty steadied my breathing while raising new alarms. I will greet you and we move straight to the table. No touching and no forced photos. Agreed, my wife barely moved her lips. I need the menu now because surprises trigger me. I pulled the tablet closer and opened the list we drafted. My wife read each item with controlled pauses. No alcohol near me or I leave. We can remove all bottles from the room. I felt heat rise because that changed our usual layout. The call paused and I heard papers shift on her side. I will bring my own drink and keep it with me. That is fine, my wife glanced at me to check. I nodded once and wrote a large reminder. I want a safe word if I get overwhelmed. My chest tightened because this was now clinical and heavy. What word do you want to use? Snow, the choice landed simple and unexpected. When you say it, we create distance immediately. I will step outside until my breathing slows. I watched our timeline bend with each new safeguard. Where will he be during cleanup? In the kitchen or out of sight? I want him completely out of sight. My hands curled because I live in that kitchen. We can assign other people to the dishes. I do not want him near me at all. We will use the patio for his space. I will not step outside if he is there. I blinked because even air now needed choreography. A vibration interrupted the call and lit my screen. Group text from a cousin requesting a goofy family video. My wife saw it and cut the notification in a blur. No group recordings this year, she projected it into the mic. Good, if cameras appear I walk out. 3 minutes remained on the timer and the air felt electric. We will text the final plan before 6. I want confirmation from your number only. You will receive that from me, she looked at me and held. I will not respond if anyone else messages. The line went quiet as if she checked her list again. Last item, if someone brings a surprise guest I leave. We will control the door and check arrivals. Then I will try to come, a long breath slid through. The call ended without goodbye and the screen went dark. I looked at my wife and the room felt rearranged. We can meet all of that, my voice sounded rough. It will take coordination we have never attempted. We will write it down and distribute roles. I knew one relative would test every boundary on principle. She opened a new note and began bulleting rapidly. I dictated the safe word and the staggered timing. She added the patio rule with 2 asterisks for emphasis. I pushed the cousin's name into the no recording list. We both stopped when the doorbell rang once. I opened the door and my cousin barged past me grinning. No rehearsal needed, I brought the tripod, he lifted a case. We are not filming this year, I blocked the hallway. He glanced at my hands and smirked like it was cute. He tried to step around and I didn't move. Everyone loved last year's stream, he tapped the case twice. Put it back in your car, my voice came out steady. Come on, it makes Grandma happy, his grin thinned. She can be happy without a broadcast, I held eye contact. The case hung between us like a dare. My wife appeared behind me and crossed her arms hard. No recording, non-negotiable, her tone sliced the room clean. Cousin's smile slid off and showed teeth. What is this, a gag order? He laughed once. House rules are posted and you read them tonight. He spotted the taped list on the fridge and scoffed. You two are turning Christmas into a courtroom. We are keeping it calm. She didn't blink. He rolled his eyes and tapped the case again. I could see him calculating workarounds already. He leaned toward me with a lowered voice. Fine, no tripod, I'll just use my phone. I stepped forward so he had to lean back. You record anything and you leave immediately. He stared like he needed to decide what mattered. He threw up his hands and tried a new angle. Who is seating where? I need to know sightlines. You don't need to know that. I kept my face flat. It affects the vibe. He tried to laugh again. I pictured him testing every note we wrote. My phone buzzed from the counter and I checked it. A text from an aunt asked if she could bring guests. I typed no and added a clear reason. She replied with a thumbs up that felt sarcastic. I braced for her to show up anyway. Cousin wandered to the dining room and measured space. 8 chairs is not enough, he announced from the doorway. It is enough, I moved to block the end. We always squeeze in 3 more, he kicked a leg lightly. Not this time, hung heavy between us. He went quiet and scanned the table like a set. Where do you want me during grace? By the door, my wife answered before I could. He frowned because that spot ruins his view. He finally understood the plan, closed his loop. He dropped the case beside his shoes and sighed loudly. All this for one person who never smiles. My wife's fingers tightened on the back of a chair. You can go home if this feels impossible. He shut up, but his eyes sparked trouble. The bell rang again and my stomach flipped hard. I opened the door to my brother with 2 grocery bags. He scanned my cousin and the case on the floor. We live here now, he joked and clapped once. I pulled him aside before he could step further. No jokes about filming, no teasing, none. He raised both palms like I was overreacting. She will walk if cameras come out. He looked at the list and nodded slowly. Got it, I'll sit on my hands if needed. Cousin tried to lighten the mood with loud nostalgia. Remember the year we did karaoke, he mimed a mic. My brother didn't bite and kept his voice low. Different year, different rules, act like a grown-up. Cousin's smile hardened into something stubborn. My wife checked the time and lifted her phone. Final plan goes out in 10 minutes. I reviewed the bullet points and adjusted 2 lines. We added a firm note about the door and arrivals. I sent the message and watched the screen for dots. Cousin twirled his keys and tested our edges again. What if she shows early just to mess with you? We meet her outside if that happens, I kept calm. She wins then, he pushed the phrase like bait. I refused to take it and let silence stand. My brother opened a bag and pulled out napkins. Where do you want these? He raised an eyebrow. Kitchen drawer on the left, I forced my shoulders down. He moved quietly and set them out like a truce. Cousin watched and decided to be offended. You two are acting like security guards. We are hosts setting boundaries, my wife's voice stayed level. He scoffed but grabbed the case off the floor. Relax, I'll keep this in the trunk. I followed him to make sure it actually left. At the door he tried one last threadbare play. She won't appreciate any of this anyway. That's her choice and none of your business. He blinked at the tone and finally backed down. I watched the case disappear into his car. Back inside, my phone pinged twice in quick succession. A response arrived from her number with 1 line. I will attend, keep everything as written. I looked at my wife and felt my chest loosen. Then another ping announced an unknown number joining the thread. Bringing a friend to help drive, the new message read. My cousin reappeared like he had smelled the tension. See, surprise guest already, he sounded almost triumphant. My wife typed fast and kept the text short. Friend's name and relationship please, door check on arrival. No reply came and the dots refused to show. Cousin watched us and folded his arms with glee. This is going to blow up, he murmured to the room. I stepped closer so he had to look at me. Not if everyone follows the plan to the letter. My brother returned and set a timer on his phone. 5 minutes until that confirmation deadline. We all stared at the silent thread and waited. I felt every second land like a small hammer. The doorbell rang again and I headed toward it. I opened to a man with keys pinched between fingers, unsmiling. Here for the drive, he scanned past me into the house. Name and connection, I asked and kept my feet planted. He flipped a card from his wallet like he expected trouble. Cousin drifted closer, pretending he needed fresh air. Logan, I'm her sponsor, he held the cup. RD steady. My chest tightened and then I stepped aside a fraction. Wait by the porch while we confirm. He nodded once and kept his eyes calm. Cousin lifted his phone like he was checking weather. I tilted my head and looked at Cousin's screen. Camera app open, red dot waiting, some hovering. Pocket it now, I didn't blink until he moved. He smirked and slid the phone away too slow. I filed the hesitation for later lines we would cross. My wife joined me at the doorway and met Logan's eyes. Text coming from my number in 1 minute. He agreed without fuss and leaned on the rail. I admired the restraint and distrusted it at once. Inside, the timer on my brother's phone crawled. A message hit the thread with 2 words only. Logan approved, then a second line after a beat. He drives me and leaves after drop-off. We looked at Logan and he lifted both palms. Drop and go, I keep it simple. I opened the door wider and pointed at the hallway. You wait near the entrance and do not wander. He nodded and stayed 2 steps inside the frame. Cousin whispered near my ear like static. This is already too much control. My brother nudged me and showed a 3rd ping. Leaving now, no emojis, no fluff. My wife inhaled once and squared her shoulders. We seat early and keep the path clear. I felt the plan tighten like a well-tied knot. Cousin drifted toward the patio with innocent hands. I followed and caught the glint of another device. He had a tiny clip-on lens tucked under his cuff. I held out my hand and did not speak. He dropped it into my palm and tried to grin. You keep pushing, I murmured because volume carried weight. I'm documenting memories, he shrugged like it was noble. Memories do not require your audience, I closed my fist. He rolled his eyes and stuffed both hands into pockets. I knew he would try again when attention shifted. A car slowed outside and the porch boards creaked once. Logan straightened and checked his watch without drama. My wife stepped forward and stood between door and hallway. I positioned myself by the kitchen entry like a wall. Cousin hovered near the stairs with a restless grin. The knob turned and then stopped as if reconsidering. My wife called out softly with steady tone. You come in when you're ready, no rush, no sugar. The door opened in a careful slice and then wider. Her eyes flicked past me first and then back. I dropped my gaze and focused on the floor. She paused at the threshold and said 1 word. Menu, the test I expected and dreaded. My wife recited each dish in a calm rhythm. No quiver, no extra adjectives, nothing she could twist. Fine, she stepped in and pointed at Logan. Wait here, he nodded and stood hands behind back. Cousin's shoe squeaked and she flinched at the sound. Snow barely above a whisper and then silence. My stomach lurched because that word was loaded. My wife raised a hand without turning her head. I hear you, we can pause, voice still even. Daughter breathed once and shook her shoulders loose. Proceed, she looked toward the table like it was a test. Cousin rocked on his heels and watched for cracks. We moved as rehearsed and kept corridors clear. My brother guided chairs with small gestures only. I stayed by the sink and counted slow in my head. Daughter reached her spot and placed her phone face down. She scanned the table like a detective choosing angles. Where will you be during cleanup? She didn't look at me. Outside or in the back room, my wife kept eyes forward. Good, she lined up utensils with exact precision. Cousin coughed like a signal and touched his pocket. My brother's hand snapped out and covered his wrist. Not today, his voice cut clean and then faded. Cousin shrugged and tried to play harmless again. I watched daughter clock the exchange and stiffen. She glanced toward the door as if measuring distance. We all felt the room tilt a degree. Her phone buzzed and she turned it over quickly. A single message from the unknown number flashed. Parking around the corner, coming in. My wife's spine straightened and she spoke low. Who is that and why now? Daughter's jaw flexed and then she looked at Logan. Friend who wanted to meet me after. That was not cleared, my wife kept her tone level. Daughter lifted her chin like she expected a fight. She will not enter, she just needs to see me walk out. I could almost hear Cousin's thoughts racing toward chaos. He glanced at the hall and then at the porch. I stepped between him and both exits without a word. We held there like chess pieces waiting for a clock. The bell rang once and the air went thin. I reached the door and cracked it the width of a palm. A woman stood there with keys on a lanyard, watchful. Name and why you're here, my voice stayed even. Marin picking her up afterward, she tried to step in. I tightened the gap and felt the hinge resist. Wait on the porch. Until contacted from this phone. She frowned and tapped a message with clipped motions. My pocket buzzed and confirmed the name on screen. I nodded and kept the door between us like armor. Behind me, boards creaked as people shifted positions. From the dining room, a chair scraped at the wrong time. Her shoulders rose and she peered over my shoulder. Is she safe? Marin tilted her head and scanned. She is seated and in control. My throat felt dry. Stay here until we clear the hallway. I turned and caught my cousin angling toward the stairs. His hand cupped something small that flashed once. My brother intercepted with a calm block and open palm. The device landed in his pocket without a word. No one laughed, and that finally changed his posture. At the table, she reached for her glass, then froze. Mute vibration against wood, an incoming call. Her eyes flicked to the doorway and tightened. Snow barely there but present and sharp. Chairs paused mid-movement like a game suddenly halted. My wife lifted a hand and cleared the path instantly. Logan stepped into view and met her focus. Outside her hallway, he asked with minimal sound. Front 2 minutes, she studied the doorframe and stood. I shifted sideways to open a clean exit. She moved past and kept her arms close to ribs. Marin straightened and lowered her gaze respectfully. No one followed, no one whispered, nothing scraped. They stepped onto the porch and the air seemed thinner. I stayed inside and watched the knob tremble. Cousin wandered near the arch again, lips pressed tight. My brother reached for napkins and got in his way. Seat now, his voice carried enough weight to matter. Cousin slumped into a chair and stared at his hands. I held his gaze until he looked down. Aunt texted the group with a cheery line about carols. I muted the thread and typed 3 words. No singing today, then I silenced notifications completely. I wanted 0 surprises while she recalibrated outside. Someone exhaled too loudly and I shot them a look. The door opened a few inches and stopped again. She appeared with Logan 1 step behind her shoulder. Marin stayed out of view like she had rehearsed it. Proceed, her voice carried farther than before. We returned to places without scraping chairs. My wife poured water with slow measured movements. I stayed by the threshold and monitored corners. Cousin tried an exaggerated smile that fooled no one. She tracked it, then dismissed him with a blink. Focus returned to the plate in front of her. Halfway through, a fork clinked and she flinched again. Logan touched his wrist and met her eyes. No cameras, no speeches, keep eating, my brother muttered. I breathed through my nose and counted to 8. The room steadied like a boat finding center. She glanced toward me once, deliberate and brief. I dropped my gaze and kept my mouth shut. A minute later, she shifted her chair an inch closer. That small move felt larger than any apology. I stayed silent because silence was the promise. When plates cleared, she placed a card by her glass. Gifts must be named before they are handed. My wife nodded and lifted a small wrapped box. Approval requested, voice low and steady. She waited and finally tapped twice. Aloud, she pushed it toward the middle gently. Open it in the other room, her tone was businesslike. My brother carried it away and returned with empty hands. We didn't ask what it was, and that helped. I caught my cousin swallowing a complaint. Marin's text pinged the thread with a short update. 10 minutes until curb, that created a new clock. We organized coats and timed movement by glances. Logan stood near the doorway like a checkpoint. Everything narrowed to footsteps and breathing. At the hallway, she paused and faced my wife fully. Thank you for structure, it was barely above a whisper. My wife nodded once and kept her eyes soft. She looked over my shoulder again and squared up. I am acknowledging the effort, not endorsing anyone. I heard the warning inside the careful phrasing. I kept my hands visible and my lips pressed shut. She took a step toward the porch and then stopped. She slid a folded note across the side table. For him to be read after I leave. She walked out with Logan matching her pace. Marin stepped forward and opened the car quietly. No one waved, no one called, just movement and breath. The door clicked and the engine noise faded. Inside, the room held still for 3 long beats. Cousin finally lifted his head and met my stare. Okay, I get it, he pushed away from the table. He reached for his coat and didn't add commentary. My brother exhaled and rubbed his forehead slowly. No one felt victorious, and that was honest. I unfolded the note beside the sink and read. Thank you for honoring my limits, continue using distance. Next time communicate only through her. I need proof over time, the last in knee was underlined. I closed my eyes because that was fair. I looked at my wife and handed her the paper. She scanned, then rested her palm on the counter. No fireworks, no streaming, no walkouts. We did what we promised, my voice sounded raw. We stared at the chairs like they might move. I walked to the doorway and checked the street. The car turned the corner and disappeared from view. My phone buzzed with a new message from her number. Today worked, keep the protocol, 5 words, no emojis. I stood there knowing I'd been wrong about the call and right about the boundary.